In the heart of Alberta, there's a man who lost his leg and almost everything else. But what he never lost was the will to show up. This isn't a story about disability. It's about resilience, about a father who fixed cars, cleaned floors, and quietly built a life for his son. One sacrifice at a time. You might not know his name, but by the end of this story, you'll remember his love. My dad didn't just lose a leg, he lost everything and still stood taller than anyone I've ever known. People always ask me how I made it through medical school. The truth is, I walked in on one leg, his. We lived just outside Red Deer, Alberta, one of those towns where winter comes early and folks mind their own business unless you're short a shovel in February. My dad worked at a steel plant on the edge of town, a no-nonsense kind of guy, flannel shirts year-round, always smelling faintly of oil and metal, the kind of man who fixed things before they broke. One October morning, everything changed. A hydraulic press misfired. A slab of steel came down hard. Seconds later, his right leg was gone. They saved his life, but not the limb. I was only 2, so most of what I know I've pieced together from quiet conversations and the sound of silence that followed him home. But I remember that hospital room, the smell of antiseptic, the way his hand wrapped around mine, still calloused and strong despite everything else being broken. And then she left. My mother came in with a look I didn't understand back then. She dropped the divorce papers on his hospital table like they were a parking ticket. Ethan needs a father who can walk, who can run with him. I'm sorry. She walked out, just like that. I don't remember her face, but I remember how he held me that night, like I was the only thing tethering him to this world. We moved into a one-bedroom rental above an old bakery. The heating barely worked. The pipes groaned every night like they were grieving too. He sold his truck to pay the hospital bills, took the bus everywhere after that, even when his prosthetic was new and rubbed his skin raw. He never once asked for help. That first winter, he fell more times than I can count, on the stairs, on the sidewalk, once while carrying a bag of groceries and holding my hand. I cried. He didn't. He just got back up, brushing snow from his coat and whispering, "We're all right, bud. We're all right." He cooked Kraft dinner, washed clothes by hand when the machine broke, read bedtime stories with tired eyes, and every night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard the soft sound of his metal leg being unstrapped, followed by a long, slow sigh. But he never missed a beat, never made me feel like we were broken. That winter, he became more than my father. He became my foundation. My earliest memories aren't of toys or cartoons. They're of sounds. The clunk of my dad's metal leg against the floor, the soft wheeze of his breath when he tried to move too quickly, and the muffled thud when he fell. He fell a lot, but he always got back up. His prosthetic arrived a few weeks after we settled into that little apartment above the bakery. It looked like something from a sci-fi movie, all steel, straps, and plastic. I remember poking it with my finger, giggling at the hollow sound. He laughed too, even though I didn't yet understand. It hurt more than it showed. Every step was a battle. His hands trembled when he shifted weight. His face tightened when the socket rubbed too hard against scar tissue. But each morning, he stood up, made oatmeal, brushed my hair, sat beside me for cartoons. One morning, snow covered everything. It was the kind of Alberta snow that piled up fast and stayed for months. We were out of milk and diapers. He bundled up, strapped on his metal leg, grabbed his crutches, and limped out the door. I watched from the window, forehead pressed to the glass. The snow came up to his shins. He slipped once, hard. I gasped, but he got back up, kept going. He returned almost an hour later, red-faced and soaked through, but in his gloved hand was a bag with milk and a small box of chocolate milk for me. Got you a treat, bud. $2 well spent. That chocolate milk. It was love in its most Canadian form. After that, he started walking a little further each day, to the end of the block, then to the grocery store, then across town to the bus stop. His limp never went away, but his resolve only grew stronger. He never once made me feel like I was a burden, never once let me see him quit. We didn't have much: a hand-me-down couch, second-hand coats, meals that stretched. But we had routine, we had effort, we had each other. Every night, after he tucked me in, I'd hear the straps come loose, the hiss of Velcro, and a soft sigh as he took off the leg. Then I'd hear the creak of his chair as he sat by the window, staring out at the streetlights. He didn't say much, but his silence was full of promises. He didn't just learn to walk again. He walked so I wouldn't have to grow up without him. 6 months after the accident, he started fixing things again. Not people's cars. Not yet. Just old tools. A busted blender someone left behind. A vacuum from the thrift store. He'd sit cross-legged on the floor, back propped against the couch, metal leg off to the side, wrench in hand, and slowly, that itch, the one to create, to work, to move, came back. Behind our building was a narrow old shed. The landlord said it was full of junk and raccoons. Dad saw potential, cleaned it out in a weekend, set up a workbench made from an old door and 2 milk crates, bought used tools from garage sales and pawn shops. That shed became our garage. It smelled like rust, oil, and old Tim Hortons cups. He always wore that faded red Canadian Tire shirt, the one with the grease stains that never came out. I sat in a lawn chair beside him after school, legs swinging, watching him work like it was a magic show. He started small: brake pads, spark plugs, oil changes for neighbors. Some paid with cash, others with baked goods. One lady once brought us homemade butter tarts and half a jug of windshield washer fluid. He never complained. "It's honest work," he'd say, "and butter tarts don't hurt." Every Friday, no matter how tight things were, he brought home donuts, usually a chocolate dip for me, a maple glaze for him. He'd hand me the brown paper bag and say, "Budget be damned. It's donut day." We'd sit on the front steps, snow crunching beneath us, sipping hot chocolate from mismatched mugs. He'd ask about school. I'd complain about math. He'd nod, listen, and occasionally offer wisdom like, "If it's broke, fix it. If it can't be fixed, don't make it worse." That garage never made us rich, but it gave him back his dignity, and it gave me a front row seat to what resilience really looked like. I started noticing it when I was about 9. Dad was getting more tired than usual. Not the kind of tired you shake off with coffee, the deep kind, like his bones were tired. He'd drift off while waiting for the kettle to boil, rub the same spot on his neck over and over, forget things like where he put his glasses, even though they were usually on his head. He never said anything, but I could feel something had changed. Then one night, I woke up thirsty and shuffled to the kitchen. His boots were gone. So was his coat. I looked out the window. Nothing but frost on the glass and snow falling under the streetlight. The next morning, I asked, "Where were you last night?" He stirred his coffee and didn't look up. "Just out for a bit." Weeks passed. It became a pattern. I started pretending to sleep just to catch the sound of the front door closing. 11:45 p.m. Like clockwork. It wasn't until I went with a friend to the corner store that the truth slipped out. Mr. Chan, the owner, smiled at me and said, "Your dad's a hard worker. Quiet guy. Never complains." I blinked. "My dad?" "Yeah," he nodded. "He's been mopping here after hours. Cleans up real nice. Brings his own bucket." I didn't know whether to feel proud or angry. I walked home that day, holding the weight of that sentence like it was too big for my hands. That night, I wrote a note on a yellow sticky and left it on the counter. "You don't have to hide that you're a hero, Dad. P.S. I'll take out the garbage this week." I never mentioned it again, neither did he. But from that day on, I looked at his tired eyes differently. They weren't just tired from work. They were tired from trying to make sure I never felt the weight he carried. And the more I grew, the more I realized he never wanted me to see him struggle. He only wanted me to see him show up. It happened when I was 12. It was raining. One of those sideways Alberta rains that soak you to the skin in seconds. I'd forgotten my jacket. School was letting out, and I was standing under the awning when I saw him. Dad, in that bright yellow poncho, limping across the lot with his cane in one hand, holding a donut bag in the other. Some kids behind me started laughing. "Look at that guy." "Is that your dad?" "He walks like a pirate." Something inside me twisted. Embarrassment? Shame? I don't even know for sure. But when he reached me and smiled, I hissed through my teeth, "Why'd you come here?" "You didn't have to." He looked surprised. "It's raining. You didn't have a coat." "I don't care. You embarrassed me." The look on his face. I still see it sometimes. Not angry, not hurt, just quiet, heavy. That night, I heard the cane tapping outside my bedroom door. A pause, then footsteps walking away. I lay under the covers, burning with guilt. But I didn't say anything. I was too proud, too ashamed of my own reaction. The next morning, he made pancakes. Like always, he placed the plate in front of me, sat down, and said nothing. I stared at it, then whispered, "I'm sorry." He looked up, gentle as ever. "Kids can be mean, but don't carry their shame. It's not yours to hold." I nodded, holding back tears. "Let them laugh," he said. "I'd rather be the dad who shows up limping than the dad who never shows up at all." That weekend, I cleaned the garage without him asking, sorted the tools, wiped down the bench, even tried to fix the leaky corner of the roof with duct, tape, and determination. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to, but something shifted between us. That was the day I stopped wishing for a different dad and started trying to deserve the one I had. It started with a cough, nothing serious at first, a little congestion, some wheezing, but by the third night, I could barely breathe. My chest was on fire, my skin was clammy. He bundled me up, called the ambulance, and rode with me through the freezing February night. I remember the lights, the panic, the way he held my hand so tightly I thought it might bruise. But I didn't care. I just wanted him there. The diagnosis was pneumonia, severe, fast moving. I needed oxygen support, IV antibiotics, and monitoring for at least a week. A specialist from Calgary was being brought in to consult. Not everything was covered by insurance. The ambulance, the specialist from Calgary, and the overnight oxygen support came with extra bills. Bills we weren't ready for. But he didn't flinch. Do whatever it takes, he told the doctor. I'll figure it out. And he did. That night, he sold the truck, the same truck he'd rebuilt himself, the one we used for grocery runs, junkyard hauls, and long drives to nowhere on summer Sundays. The same truck whose keys used to hang on a nail beside the front door. When I came home from the hospital, that hook was empty. I asked once, casually, "Where's the truck?" He shrugged, traded it in, wasn't running right. He never said more, never made a scene, just kept showing up. It wasn't until I was 16, years later, that I learned the truth. A neighbor mentioned it when Dad was taking the bus to pick up a carburetor. I confronted him that night, trying not to sound like I was crying. "You sold the truck to pay for the hospital?" He didn't stop working, just kept tightening a bolt and said, "You can always buy another truck. You only get one son." I didn't cry in front of him, but I did in my room, and every time I passed that empty nail by the door, I was reminded he didn't just give up his truck, he gave up his freedom, so I could keep mine. The auditorium was packed. It was my graduation from medical school. I wore the robe, the cap, the nerves. They called my name, and as I walked across the stage, I found him in the front row, old jacket, graying hair, his legs stretched out into the aisle for room. His eyes weren't just proud, they shimmered with something more. When it was my turn to speak, I stepped up to the mic, looked straight at him, and said, "I want to talk about someone who never wore a lab coat, who never went to college, but who taught me more about healing than any textbook ever could. My father lost his leg when I was 2. My mother left. He raised me with one limb and twice the strength. He fixed cars by day, cleaned floors by night. He sold his truck to save my life and never asked for thanks. Dad, if I can be half the man you are, I'll be a great doctor. And if anyone asks me how I got here, I walked in on one leg, yours." There was a silence in the room that felt sacred. Afterward, people lined up to shake his hand. He looked a bit overwhelmed, not great with compliments, but he smiled at each person. The corners of his eyes crinkled with a quiet kind of joy. That evening, we drove home. I was behind the wheel. He sat in the passenger seat like he always did, watching the road, giving directions I didn't need anymore. We passed the cenotaph in town, the one he always stood beside on Remembrance Day. Even when snow reached his knees, he looked out the window and said nothing. I knew what he was thinking. That night, I cooked dinner. Shepherd's pie, his favorite. He had seconds. Before bed, He paused at my door and said, "I'm proud of you, kid." I always was. I smiled. "Me too, Dad." He hesitated, then added, "You were the leg I stood on. You always were. And that's the truth. He gave me everything. And because of him, I walk into every patient's room carrying something stronger than knowledge. I carry his legacy, and every time I stand beside someone who needs help, I know he's still holding me up. If this story reminded you of someone in your life, a father, a mentor, maybe even yourself, we'd love to hear it. Drop a comment below, share your story, or simply leave a "Thank you, Dad." Sometimes the quietest heroes deserve the loudest recognition. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear your story too. Like this video if it stayed with you, and don't forget to subscribe to Silent Wound Stories for more real, emotional stories.